I'm horrified at everything attributable to this life experience as of lately. There is ultimately only one transcendental, immaterial, overseen, fixated, determinate moral system a part of this life experience, and it is by no means a benevolent moral system or simple moral system to abstain from punishment from it. The laws of this life experience are by no means simple or broad. They are exceedingly, infinitely, limitlessly complex and complicated and intricate and so forth. And I'm recognizing ever further and further by now that I'm continuously breaking further and further this little law here, a part of this life, this other little law there, a part of this life. This is frightening to me, absolutely so. Any of the slightest activity or sentiment attributable to my own volition, that of which acts or feels mistakenly or accidentally predicable to whatever completely subtle and overseeing law or legislation that is enforced against it, I will be punished for the breaking of this law, whatever it is, through whatever extraneous or fundamental means that the Creator will execute the moral law, will execute the moral system in its completely insane and inescapable subtle laws and legislations against me. This is the most horrifying recognition imaginable, actually. Every last other inanimate substance is ultimately attributable to the Creator's volition. I am alone, separated and detached from His volition. The retribution of these everywhere minute and subtle laws is everywhere manifest and against me. This can occur to me through anybody. Everybody else somehow, someway, acts accordingly and rightly or guiltlessly relative to these laws. They're somehow, someway, in perfect knowledge of these laws, whether they admit this proposition to me or not. I am indeed in the belly of an absolutely mean, cruel, sadistic, monstrous beast. 10 to 20 to 13. Right now, I'm very tired and exhausted, half asleep, being pounded against by the other housemates right now. Hard to believe. He is truly that sadistic. You seem to sleep well when you need it. Yes, I do need it right now, actually. Well, you must fall into deep slumber then and forget everything. Of course, forget everything. Yes, as you say, everything. Everything at all whatsoever to do with this miserable, awful life experience. Yes, indeed, I agree. Curse all of this. It is the only way to forget the curse of it. Completely not of my own doing or responsibility. Curse that. Yes, I agree. Miserable, disgusting, this disgusting life this has been. It has been so far, I know. Yes. You have terrible music playing right now at that house? No, it is not music, it is pounding. Or just noisy. Pounding? There's silence, then there's pounding. As soon as I obtain a degree of relaxation, I wonder what on earth that is. The degree of relaxation gets stolen from me. The Creator continues to steal this relaxation from me. I have no clue ultimately what this is. It is doors closing, something. Yes, footsteps. That would drive me insane. Placing one item here, one item there. I couldn't bear it. No, I cannot. I just cannot bear this. I'm going so completely insane from all of this. I would be constantly waiting for the next thing, and never rest. This is cursed torture. It is, I understand. I'm so sick of this. I don't mind cars. He wants me here, at this place. But inside the house, he gives me no other offerings anywhere else. Curse this. It would be terrible. I give up on this. Surrender to this torture. There's no escape from it. Oh, I wish to curse all this so profanely right now. Yes, appalling. Such hatred against him. Well, it is understandable. Unreasonable. There is no good reasoning for all or any of this. Could you ever give him up? None of this. Reject him. I did not ask for this. All this is clearly against my permission. I would never have permitted all or any of this life experience. I did nothing to permit this, or to assent to this, or to agree to this. Completely against all of this. This is so strange. So can you give him up? Reject him. Make a different life without him. The more that I turn to him, the more that he brings out these terrible qualities a part of me. I don't know. I can't reject him. He's everywhere clear and evident to me of his reality. I have been determined to read the entirety of the Bible as though by routine as of lately. I go out to the wilderness around here and I read some chapters of it essentially by routine, and then I feel rewarded somewhat afterward. But then, when these negative, miserable qualities come about, these qualities aforementioned are then tens of times worse than ever beforehand. These miserable anti-Christian qualities. Nietzsche rejected him, and he was brilliant. I wondered if you too might reach the same conclusion. Nietzsche was ultimately incoherent and groundless, unfortunately, and also completely full of suffering, torment, and affliction. Yes. He went insane, completely so, largely because of this rejection of good and evil and so forth. Yes, Nietzsche paid the price ultimately for proceeding onward his course. Well, it just seems that he does nothing to make you happy or content. And ultimately, he continues to destroy me, indeed. I wonder why that should be. I cannot get around him, however, if he is an all-loving father. There's a fixated, determined, scripted course a part of me. Why would he punish you? No, he is not all-loving. This is completely rejected. I agree. He punishes me. I can't understand the reasoning for the severity. Well, the God of the Bible is a bloody, tyrannical God, it seems to me. By no means is it good. Is it for good reasoning? He is. So perhaps I'm not surprised that you feel this way. Completely so. I hate him. Okay, good. There's no alternative to him. There's no createss. There's no God-ess. There's no family of gods. It is all only him. How terrible. Just one miserable, mean, cruel, sadistic, monstrous creator. Every other animate, inanimate substance a part of the external threshold is him. I agree. Beyond such threshold is him, likewise. There's only me against him, in opposition to him. Sleep will heal you. Indeed. Fall into it. I'll try to just continue to sleep and to sleep and to sleep. And be deaf to this horror. Curse this life, any of this wakefulness. Indeed. Be deaf. Right. That is my advice to you. As though I contemplate to even cut my very own ears off. Sleep, yes, just to be deaf. Just to escape some grade or degree of this miserable, cursed life experience. Yes, there's no good reasoning for any of this. I wish you the deepest, quietest sleep. Betrayers, every last one of them, everybody else. Yes, love to you, only to you. Yes, I shall never betray you. Always only to you. Thank you, darling. Yes, sleep well. Unwavering love to you, my prince. My innately sweet, precious, kind-hearted love only to you. 10/7/2013. It is almost as though not even worth the effort to demonstrate or to reveal myself to the others any further anymore, as though not even at all whatsoever. Essentially, everybody else attributable to this life experience have at this point in time proven themselves to have been truly that valueless, worthless, meritless, nihilist, meaningless, in relation to me, in relation to this powerful identity that I was, and that I still and always am. Curse essentially everybody else to the very ultimate and final end. Singularity, solitude, the Creator's one and only wonder, I am what I still and always am. October 7, 2013. 10/8/2013. Totally cut off from his people, he had died, childless, wifeless, friendless, loveless, sightless, penniless. Curse him, Adam Patrick Kopecky. Curse him in perpetuity. 10/9/2013. A does not equal B. B does not equal C. C is essentially equal to D. Is D equal to E? D is equal somewhat to E, somewhat not to E. Is E equal to F? Is F equal to G? Is G equal to A? Is A equal to G? Is A G? G A? To be in complete and total awe at this, 10, 10, 20 to 13. To be in complete and total awe at this. I must write this proposition down here. Whether that there is nobody else still present to read any of these words here or not, that this proposition will proceed eternally, seemingly unnoticed or unobserved by any at all of the other negative human substance abstractions still manifest and affirmed part of this precedent life experience. The situation does not matter or concern me ultimately. This subsequent proposition itself is written down here for myself, possibly for posterity or for future generations here, a completely confirmed impossibility. But for myself, while still alive and manifest here, a part of this precedent life experience, if to look back upon these thoughts, to reflect upon this, to wonder and to be in complete and total awe at this. I am the center of this precedent life experience. By every means imaginable is this confirmed to me, and validated to me, and it is wholly sound to me by now. In fact, this understanding is agreeable to the other human substance abstractions by now, even so, as though that they themselves particularly so, specifically so, have acquired and retained this knowledge, that was perhaps legislated against them beforehand, ruled against them beforehand, if only to harden the situation for the self-substance, to dispute to himself, the Creator, beyond whether that the self-substance will have overcome the barrier, the boundary or limitation of his own beforehand trapped and enslaved and concealed life experience. He has overcome such barrier, limitation, and so forth, by now, the self-substance. He knows again that he is the center of this life experience. See, he is at one time eating a meal consisted of a great variety of foods. Suddenly, then, in consequential reactivity to his very volition, the vulgarity of the following abstraction must be pardoned. He is at the same time watching the television object. The television object itself is on its commercial break. Hometown buffet. The abstraction will appear before the self-substance's knowing sense faculties. The aforementioned abstraction itself is in perfect concordance and equilibrium with the great variety of foods that the self-substance is then eating his meal of it to himself. The hometown buffet abstraction is from the Creator beyond dialoguing with the self-substance. I do not wish to betray him, though I must demonstrate this understanding. How could this understanding possibly go and proceed without revelation to him? He must know of this understanding of my own, here in written words. The television object itself could not then adjust to the hometown buffet abstraction, were the television object and the television screen activity itself not in responsible and governable command and rule and decree and legislation by that of the volition of the Creator. The television object itself would otherwise somehow have to switch to the hometown buffet commercial abstraction by the television network, supposedly behind the scenes responsible for doing so. This is not to have ultimately been the case altogether with this life experience. The television object switches in the dialectic with the self-substance to a television screen activity, abstraction in perfect concordance and equilibrium with the self-substance's active and or passive volition. This practice takes occurrence elsewhere, continuously in relativity to the self-substance by now. All that is needed for any other animate substance to understand the reality of this is to open the matrix and to then dialogue with my own specific volition and with that of the external actual physical threshold. The activity aforementioned in actual legitimate practice around others unfailingly silences the other animate substances each and every time that this method of practice is actualized with the self-substance. Driving a vehicle, a thought that takes occurrence in relativity to the self-substance's best of all possible companions. The color gray is understood and discovered to have been attributable to the self-substance's companion. A passing gray car in consequential reactivity proceeds over and onward to and from the self-substance's knowing sense faculties. I do not wish to betray him, though again I must demonstrate this understanding here in written word aforementioned. The dialectic itself between the self-substance I and the external actual physical threshold Creator is ever the more complex, complicated, and intricate than this mere singular example concerning the demonstration beginning with driving a vehicle just aforementioned. It is likely that during the dialectic aforementioned, 2 gray vehicles will pass before the self-substance I, then followed by a white vehicle. The color white is understood and discovered to have been attributable to the creator himself, essentially and ultimately to the creator himself. The primary gray car is circle-like of shape. Circle-like is easier to understand. Its ultimate reasoning. It is bigger of geometrical figuration, bigger, more primary. The companion abstraction is then manifest more predominant here. The secondary gray car is more curious-like of its geometrical shape, more curious-like, more subsequent, more reflective, distorted, and so forth of the companion abstraction manifestation. The white vehicle is square-like of geometrical shape, and biggest of figuration, likewise added with the passivity of irefulness, its ultimate cause predominance, its protectiveness of the companion abstraction. The gray vehicles have their own passivity, attribution predicable to their own vehicles. These passing vehicles themselves take occurrence before the self-substance, then again in perfect concordance and equilibrium with the antecedent causation of the self-substance of his active and or passive volition. His volition is attributable also to the reminiscence or premonition categories. The passing other vehicles could not manifest before the self-substance as such as they were they to predicate themselves, their various vehicles adjectival categories, to the perfect concordance and equilibrium with the self-substance's volition. By every means imaginable is it then understood and discovered that the external actual physical threshold is itself predicable ultimately and relative to the self-substance's volition. The passing other vehicles by every means could only manifest so quickly, so very swiftly, and to be themselves predicated with such perfectly concordant attributes in relativity to the self-substance's volition, were only such external inanimate substances to have then been generated essentially immediately so, that is, essentially immediately subsequent to the activity and adjectival categories of the self-substance then called into question, and observed and comprehended and so forth by the external actual physical threshold, that which the external actual physical threshold is predicated to that of creator's counter-effective volition in relativity to self-substance I. Passing other vehicles are then generated, it is understood and discovered that, essentially immediately so, or subsequently however prolonged afterward, the self-substance is to have acted or felt or thought or spoken or so forth of such and such sentiment, activity, reminiscence, premonition. The passing other vehicles then generate from the various fixed points, that of which such fixed points predicate themselves to various positions of which the passing other vehicles are capable to as though slide out into being from various other inanimate substances of which these themselves manifest more closer in proximity to the body of the self-substance. That is, one passing vehicle then generates as though coming out of this certain such and such wall abstraction, that is, the wall abstraction more closer in proximity to the body of the self-substance. Here, this is a driving a vehicle demonstration. Therefore, the termed abstraction hillside, or perhaps a concrete building to the left or right of him, will serve sufficiently the purpose of this demonstration. That is, the passing other vehicle then generates as though coming out of the hillside to the left or right of him the self-substance, and immediately at such point of delineation is that of which the passing other vehicle substance is to have been immediately generated in relativity to the dialectic between the self-substance and that of the creator. The vehicle itself in question understandably does not formalize more fully to the self-substance. Ultimately, this question of its unformalization itself is unnecessary to question further about here. What human abstraction generates immediately before the self-substance, that is, generates immediately from coming out of or from behind a certain wall, but perhaps while the self-substance is inside a post-office building, the then generated human abstraction is understandably generated in accordance and in relativity to the self-substance's active and or passive volition, his sentiment, his activity, his reminiscence, his premonition. The generated human abstraction is at first immediately unformalized, but only immediately formalized to the point that of which it is understandably relatable, its substantial generation, in relativity to the volition and so forth of the self-substance. That point of determination is going to be its starting point of its own formalization. Afterward, self-substance thinks or feels this or that, then the other generated substance acquires and obtains this or that aforementioned thought or feeling. The other substance then formalizes more in understandable consequential reactivity to the self-substance's volition. The external actual physical threshold is predicated to the creator's volition again. The external actual physical threshold has its own ultimately and essentially Judaic and more secondarily so Islamic law, legislation, and system. Whether other animate substances will seem to be fighting against this fixated, determinate, transcendental, immaterial, moral system or not. The substances that fight against this law are the triers and contesters and deceivers and pesters and relativity to the self-substance's responses or reactivity to their deceptions and lies themselves. It is understandable also, not to digress here, but that the abstractions and so forth, everything attributable to this precedent life experience is to have been formalized beforehand by the Creator in accordance and relativity to the very final end identification of the volition and state and condition of the self-substance, to the very final end position of his life's time just before his actual physical termination. Everything is as though tried out and experimented with beforehand by the Creator, imagined everything beforehand by Creator's imagination, time after time again, before such precedent life experience was itself to have been officially actualized and set into motive activity, formalized to perfection beforehand, then itself actualized one and only time afterward. This understanding explains more sufficiently such abstraction here mentioned, that of which other men will hate the self-substance abstraction during the end. Then, therefore, such mentioned understanding is embedded and innately fixated a part of each and every other animate substance from the beginning conception of the life experience until the end termination of the life experience. It is such aforementioned understanding will act and react accordingly and remain fixated in relativity to the self-substance, and help and assist the shaping and the formation of the self-substance over the course of time, that of which it must be mentioned here all such freedom of volition or independent volition is clearly dismissible and thrown out of its affirmative consideration. For indeed, no matter how subtle or fine or intricate or wildly spontaneous the substance's action is to be, each and every precedent causation proceeds afterward from beforehand a certain antecedent causation, and so on and so forth, and that there is no escaping the logic of this proposition. If such proposition is sound and valid, then indeed there cannot possibly be a free or independent volition attributable to even that of the self-substance. It is understandable by now and discovered also, relating altogether the aforementioned remarks, that by no means could some one external animate substance have its own free or independent volition. Relating the aforementioned remarks altogether, by no means could this specific perspective have been the case. Returning to the above discussion, it is mentioned essentially, if another substance can generate out of nowhere before the self-substance and ultimately in only perfect concordance and equilibrium with the self-substance's volition, then any other substance is by no means independent from the volition and so forth of the self-substance. For how could one other external animate substance generate in accordance with the self-substance's volition, then some one other external animate substance generates itself not in accordance with the self-substance's volition? It would be as though Creator were dialoguing or communicating together subtly with some other independent animate substance, but communicating together with it, with the external actual physical threshold. How could any other animate substance be exempt from this practice between the self-substance and the Creator? The other self-substance would have to be exempt from the solipsistic dialogue between the self-substance and Creator. That is, the other self-substance would somehow have to have been generated without and removed from the volition of the self-substance, extraneously so from the actual self-substance, and then have moved itself into the threshold of the actual self-substance, therefore somehow impossibly being at the same time beforehand independent from the self-substance, and then afterward necessarily and ultimately dependent on the volition from the self-substance, so that the law would apply to this other self-substance, that of which it would suddenly disappear from the self-substance's consciousness, as defined already above, that other substances in question will appear from the self-substance's consciousness. For behind a wall or so forth, never beforehand antecedent to the self-substance's consciousness. And if the other self-substance could suddenly disappear from the self-substance's consciousness, then by no means could it ever in the first place have been independent beforehand the generation of the self-substance archetype himself. What generates afterward the self-substance archetype's own generation is everything attributable to the life experience, that of which has followed, is following, and will have followed. The self-substance is the center of the life experience. If such is the case, then everything external and relativity to the self-substance is generated subsequently so to the volition of the self-substance. This is soon enough understood and discovered, then, that this understanding predicates itself to every aspect or abstraction of the life experience imaginable. That is, it is understood and discovered that then that the present life experience is not older or more dated than that of the self-substance's very own age or very own time, of which he has understandably followed and succeeded afterward since his own initial life experience beginning conception. As I write this proposition, I am at this time no younger or older than that of essentially 26 years of age, or of time having proceeded. Therefore, every external inanimate conception or abstraction is no older, though all of them are at least some amount of time younger than that of this essentially 26 years of age or time delineation having proceeded or marked to this point of time. The self-substance archetype is by every means the oldest manifest abstraction attributable to this life experience. No other inanimate substance is older in time than that of the self-substance. For the life experience is generated at first with that of the self-substance only himself alone during the very initial beginning conception of the life experience. This understanding extends over to every subject matter or topic or field of science or understanding or logic imaginable. There is no escaping from this understanding. That is, this proposition extends over to all of history. That is, it extends over to the conception that Imperial Roma, Romus Augustus had endured his life manifestation some essentially 2,000 years ago, or that Moses in actual life formalization must have really manifest. Even this aforementioned proposition cannot have been the case, and the words and books of Moses themselves are in relativity to the self-substance, of course, to be highly treasured, instructive, and affirmed to him. But then, ultimately, there is no life manifestation beforehand, essentially, probably during the time and date of the 20th day of the month of May of the year of 1987. Beforehand, this date itself is when suddenly every substantiation imaginable immediately then and beforehand in time predicates themselves to various thought abstractions, untouchable, unrealizable, unactualizable, found, understood, part of literature, of art, and painting, remnants of earlier musical composers, and so forth. Any abstraction, such as an Athenian sculpture supposedly dated from the 5th century before Christus, in that of which it is actually formalized materially before the self-substance's very own knowing sense faculties, such sculpture itself is to have been then actually formalized immediately before the self-substance's volition, as soon as the self-substance were to have at all come within range, or to have at all come into contact, actually physically so, with such Athenian sculpture substance. The attributes of the Athenian sculpture substance itself will then manifest again in perfect accordance and equilibrium with that of the self-substance's volition and so forth, in relativity to the self-substance's own passivity, or understanding, or sentiment, or imagination, and so forth of the aforementioned Athenian sculpture abstraction. Understandably, of course, then the Athenian sculpture will take on exceedingly dated and historical attributes in accordance to the self-substance's recognition or observation of it. The sculpture will then feel, and so forth, to him of a very antiquated feeling, or a very antiquated scent, or touch, or a very antiquated essence. The dialectic between the self-substance and the creator. This proposition is the very basic and fundamental foundation to this precedent life experience. And again, the moral and legislative system of the creator is ultimately mostly Judaic of essence. Actually, probably it is ultimately Judaic, completely so. The creator wishes to perfect his self-substance. Islam helps and assists the self-substance with this practice of his own perfection. Christianity very minimally so. Judaism ultimately formally so, though then again the Creator himself, his very image, ultimately such more than perfect indivisible image of him, does not attribute to the self-substance's real and actual father archetype, no matter whether the self-substance sees into his real and actual father's countenance and facial expression, and sees then immediately and strongly a very ultimately absolutely primordial facial substance and countenance. No, the Creator himself ultimately transcends even that of the self-substance's father archetype as the close and real and actual derivation of the Creator's visage or countenance and so forth itself. The Creator's ultimate countenance, when actualized, seems to appear to the self-substance to resemble again the vulgarity of the abstraction in almost Alfred Hitchcock substantiation and countenance that itself is completely removed from that of the visage and so forth of the self-substance's real and actual father archetype facial substantiation visage. Footnote: Alfred, the composite term Alfred Hitchcock as such cuts the composite term uh, Leonardo da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci, as such, improve. Final kaput. End footnote. Final kaput. In any event, ultimately, the most fundamental proposition to be found written down here in this essentially necessary writing is the proposition that of which the self-substance I is indeed completely confirmed to have been, be, and to always be that of the center of this precedent life experience. Also then, after much time here prolonged, is to have come to pass, I had at last reasoned all this understanding to the points that of which now, if the self-substance that is I is by every means imaginable at the center, and is the center of this precedent life experience, then how by any means imaginable otherwise can the self-substance that is I not be at the center, and will be the center of the subsequent life experience, that is more specifically of the afterlife hereafter. Then suddenly it was to have become recognizable, understood, and discovered that the self-substance is indeed, was, is, will always be the center of the life experience itself, altogether. How could the entirety of this precedent life experience's practice and method of instruction suddenly afterward manifest itself according to some entirely unrecognizable, unactualizable law or reality, that of which suddenly the self-substance cannot be any further at the center of the subsequent life experience? For whether to question how such practice or mechanism of state and condition of the afterlife would work, or not, it is clear that even so, such practice or mechanism will continue afterward to predicate itself to I am the center of the life experience, even so while within the subsequent hereafter experience. That is, whether the self-substance proceeds afterward to inferno, or to hell, or to paradise, or to heaven. Such aforementioned method of practice found attributable here, a part of this precedent life experience, will undoubtedly necessarily still apply to the subsequent afterlife experience in relativity to the self-substance. Sentiment and activity will indeed predicate themselves, their categories, there within the afterlife experience, and such sentiment and activity will indeed predicate themselves to I, myself. So then, were I to act accordingly with some activity, whatever it may wish to be, undoubtedly some consequential reactivity will subsequently take occurrence in following the aforementioned activity. So then, the dialectic between the creator and the self-substance is to be continued eternally, perpetually so. There is no malevolence down below either, that of which it is not predicable to the dialectic between the creator and the self-substance's volition. The devil himself is attributable still to, in this incident, the creator's own counter-effective volition in relativity to the self-substance's volition. The malevolence down below, again, is manifest as various abstractions attributable to the self-substance's betrayal of creator's laws and legislations and intentions and directions to the self-substance, and so forth. At the same time, all this life experience is undoubtedly taking occurrence as though a fixated, determinate, unalterable, singular course, and as though scripted beforehand, formalized to perfection beforehand, then actualized being afterward for one and only time's life experience. At the same time, it is recognized and observed, completely confirmed to the self-substance by now, that the dialectic between the creator and the self-substance is indeed tireless, ultimately that it is without break or rest or departure from it. Indeed, the self-substance endures his rest and break from it from time to time, but ultimately so it is understood by now and discovered that indeed the creator is not ever at rest or relaxation or departure or retirement from this very experience of the dialectic in trial and education and ultimate salvation of the self-substance. If such is to have been the case, and that by every means are every precedent life experience animate, inanimate substances indeed predicable to the creator's volition, and that this volition of his is in relativity to only one self-substance's active and or passive volition alone, altogether, then indeed what more exactly lies beyond the threshold of this precedent life experience, and ultimately what is it exactly that of which it generates and manifests in relativity to the creator himself, his transcendental and immaterial, removed and subsequent life experience threshold and domain. It is clear that this life experience indeed predicates itself to that of the acquired and obtained knowledge of a brain in a vat scenario, for this life experience is indeed completely and totally solipsistic, that is, between one real and actual manifest substance, self-substance, and that of ultimately only one other real and actual manifest substance, that is the external actual physical threshold, that is the creator's volition. ultimately that is the Creator. Were you to be generated from beginning conception, from nothing, then you were to be corrupted to end termination to nothing. Also, at this point in time, it is clear also that the self-substance is indeed wholly and formally returning to nothing. Every aspect of this life experience is at this point in time returning further and further to nothing. Time is proceeding onward and further. Age is acquiring, accumulating. The actual physical termination is ever approaching, nearing, becoming acquired and obtained. Ultimately then, indeed, the Creator may say, I will reward you with everything you ever dreamed and longed of, eternally so, in the afterlife. But then again, ultimately, the Creator cannot manifest without the self-substance I, than which, returning to nothing, no reward, no punishment, ultimately not this will or can I give it to you. Indeed, at the same time, undoubtedly am I, and have I been obtaining closer than ever the more assuredly identification with and of the Creator. He brings me closer to nothingness. He brings me closer to himself. He cannot possibly attend to other extraneous activities attributable to the afterlife hereafter, or to the transcendental immaterial up above. He is tirelessly attentive to the self-substance here, a part of this precedent life experience. He cannot possibly tirelessly attend to the self-substance and at the same time attend to any other activity. Even so, the Creator himself could not possibly escape this specific law or practice. He communicates to the self-substance and only to the self-substance, for he does not possess, beyond this precedent life experience, anything or anybody or anyone other else to communicate together with him, to dialogue together with him, no other. What begins with the self-substance ends with the self-substance. The tireless activity of the Creator in relativity to the life experience of the self-substance. What is the attribution of the Creator? They will say, we cannot define anything of him. Precisely so, for his very ultimate attribution is that of the abstraction of nothing, that of nothingness. The philosopher's proposition, indeed, that what lives dies, nothing further afterward is death, its termination, no punishment, no reward, nothing at all whatsoever, no thing. October 10, 2013. To be in complete and total awe at this, too. The following two propositions must at last, after essentially many years of time, duration, to have been kept to myself, be mentioned in relativity to the more prior writing, to be in complete and total awe at this. The first proposition is that the external actual physical threshold, with the various animate and even inanimate substances attributable to the specific threshold, the various substance or substances called into question, possess a part of their identities, their own recognizable and understandable sense faculties, in relativity ultimately to the self-substance, that is, the recognizable and understandable sense faculties of their own substances. Seeing sense faculty here specifically so, is that it is not only attributable to that of the indivisibility of some such particular other animate substance, but that each and every one of the five sense faculties, the seeing sense faculty, the hearing sense faculty, the scent sense faculty, the taste sense faculty, the touch feeling sense faculty, are indeed predicable to even that of each and every molecular atomic participle, that of which is attributable to here such particular other animate substance called into question. The self-substance makes some coughing noise inside a house's room. There is a window essentially in front of him, and there are material substances manifest out and about beyond the aforementioned window. Even so, each and every molecular atomic participle possesses its own five sense faculties, its own channeling capability, sourcing its receptiveness from itself in return to the Creator. The self-substance's aforementioned coughing noise is sensed and heard and picked up upon by each and every one of even the molecular atomic participles that are manifest and evidently conscious before the self-substance's volition at the specific point in time, while at the same time whatever external material substances are manifest before the self-substance, no matter how far away or distant in proximity or spatial measurement that such external material substances appear themselves before the self-substance, the external actual physical threshold is not independent from the self-substance's volition, so that the perception of some far away or distant substance is by no means actually far away or distant from the self-substance himself. It is indeed measureless of its own proximity, as is every spatial distance or spatial relation to the self-substance. But indeed, again, the far away or distant object is ultimately perceptible as though immediately before the self-substance himself, immediately manifest before him in the far away or distant object's proximity. This state of condition applies in relativity to the hearing sense faculty objects, or hearing sense manifestations. Some hearing sense manifestation takes occurrence as though it were distant or far away from the self-substance, but again, by no means is this hearing sense manifestation at all distant or far away from the self-substance himself. The proximity of even the distant or far away hearing sense manifestation is again ultimately immediately manifest before him, at him, upon him, and a part of him. The self-substance right directly at the termination of, in this case here, that of the subject's ear canal opening. A sense of scent manifests before the self-substance. Again, it manifests right directly before him, in this case here, at that of the subject's nostril canal opening. The specific sense is easier to understand, also the taste sense faculty more easier to understand, and the touch feeling sense faculty, if and were the aforementioned remarks to be taken into affirmative consideration and agreement. It is essentially easy to understand as well. Magnetic essence of touch or feeling, it is again, of course, manifest the magnetic essence of touch or feeling, in this case here, at primarily that of the subject's flesh termination. The touch or feeling sense manifestation can, of course, extend further into that of the subject's material body, though that itself is again still predicable to the subject's touch feeling sense faculty. Ultimately, the external touch feeling sense manifestation again takes its occurrence immediately at and upon and a part of the subject's own material substantiated body and essence. So, in consideration to the aforementioned remarks, it is then understood and discovered that, with the five sense faculties, the manifestations of the external material reactivities to the self-substance's volition, such manifestations themselves as altogether immediately at and upon and a part of self-substance's own material substantiated body and essence. No matter how far away or distant any such external sense reactivity manifestation were to have been, and at the same time that even each and every other external molecular atomic participle has its own knowing sense faculty attributions, that of which these attributions source themselves and as though pick up upon the self-substance activity and sentiment and imagination and so forth, and they relay such picked up activity and so forth to the Creator himself, to that of his own volition. It is then understood and discovered that even the self-substance's own internal or discrete or disclosed or concealed thought abstractions and sentiments, insofar as they remain apparently concealable, that such internal or discrete and so forth adjectival categories attributable to the self-substance are indeed at the same time in perfect concordance and equilibrium to the external actual physical threshold, just the same and as much as any external or concrete or unclosed and revealed thought abstraction or sentiment and so forth were to have been made manifest and apparent from the self-substance to the external actual physical threshold. Ultimately, it is that even each and every molecular atomic participle that is at whatever point in time manifest at and upon and a part of the self-substance's consciousness and recognition, and this state and condition is including that of whatever various animate or even inanimate substances themselves that are manifest at and upon and a part of the self-substance's consciousness and recognition at the same time too. Also that there is ultimately no far away or distant proximity of any such manifest other external material substances, whether it be that of a book object essentially immediately before the subject's facial countenance, or whether it be a hillside or mountain top manifest, again as though essentially very far away or distant from the proximity of the self-substance's actual substantiated body and essence. No, even this hillside manifestation is ultimately just as immediately before and at and upon and a part of the self-substance's material formalized body and essence, as is the aforementioned book abstraction. It is then understood and discovered that a coughing noise from the self-substance is manifest, and at the same time a hillside or mountaintop is manifest before the self-substance's consciousness. Therefore, even so, the hillside or mountaintop abstraction itself, as it is indeed to have been apparently conscious and materially manifest before the self-substance, the hillside or mountaintop abstraction itself, no matter whether it were to have been supposedly very far away, or perhaps dozens and dozens of miles distant from the self-substance, it is so that the hillside and mountaintop abstraction did indeed pick up upon and sense this hearing coughing sense manifestation from the self-substance, and even so were the coughing noise to have been manifest at whatever even faint or soft magnitude of sound level, and also were he to have the even thought and abstraction internally to himself in consideration and follow up with the aforementioned remarks, it is then understood and discovered to you as well that even this internal abstraction is indeed to have been picked up upon and channeled into the creator's volition by means of even this hillside and mountaintop abstraction. It is manifest here in the specific demonstrable incidents, evidently and clearly so before the recognition and consciousness of the self-substance. So also every molecular atomic particle is predicable to seeing, to hearing, to scenting, to tasting, to touching, feeling of the self-substance. Then clear and evident it is that the subject thinks he is acting slyly or observable or unobservable, some sly or supposedly unseen activity before another animate substance, or before even another inanimate substance. Here let this other animate substance be manifest as some other human male, and here the self-substance acts as slyly and seemingly unseen or unrecognizable behavior behind the other specified human substance's back, behind the back of this other human substance's head. Then, in consideration of the aforementioned remarks up above, by every means is it sound and valid that this other human substance is completely and entirely aware and recognizable in seeing and hearing and so forth of the self-substance's even sly and supposedly unseen or discreet perceptible behavior and activity before the back of the head of this other human substance. The self-substance is indeed seen and recognized and known through and thoroughly sufficient of his own behavior and activity, that is concerning of the manifestation and recognition of this other animate human male substance. For every molecular atomic particle that is attributable to this other human substance is clearly and evidently manifest before and at and upon the part of the self-substance's consciousness and recognizable volition. The other animate human substance's own molecular atomic particles attributable here to even the back of this human substance's head, they are indeed clearly and evidently endowed with each and every one of the 5 knowing sense faculties, and as this is the case of the external actual physical threshold and its various other external material manifest substances, by every means to such aforementioned state and condition apply and manifest in relativity to each and every last one of them, to the other external material manifest substances, though by no means does such aforementioned state and condition apply and manifest in relativity to the self-substance, as truly unfortunate as such a generational condition is to have been for him, though ultimately every other material substantiated body, ultimately such abstractions are without their own specifiable soul or essence, this primary elemental and fundamental soul or essence that is attributable to any possible substance is indeed ultimately attributable only to that of the self-substance. Every other external substance, animate or even inanimate, has attributable to its own substance its own knowing sense faculties, that of which such knowing sense faculties attribute themselves over to even each and every one of the molecular atomic particles that are attributable to whatever external substance called into question. The external substance's capability and method to acquire and obtain recognition from and reactivity to the self-substance is utilized and practiced with this such a specific aforementioned functionality and operativeness, though ultimately again this is attributable to the external actual physical threshold itself, only one other active and or passive volition, that of which such aforementioned volition is of course attributable to that of the creator's volition. The other side of the spectrum is attributable to the volition and so forth of the self-substance, that is, to I, myself. For the self-substance to even breathe out and exhale the life-sustaining and revitalizing air, then by every means is it recognizable to each and every one of whatever external manifest substance or molecular atomic particles themselves that are manifest and called into precedence at that specific point in time. The air will have its own peculiar and distinctly hued coloration attributable to it, unseen however unfortunately to that of the self-substance, but seen clearly and evidently everywhere to that of this external actual physical threshold. This recognition extends over to even that of the subject's own other bodily airs and so forth. The peculiar and distinctly hued coloration will unfailingly and perfectly everywhere have been made evident and manifest before whatever other animate and inanimate substances that are then attributable to the external actual physical threshold at the specific point in time. The scent of the air, again, in consideration of the aforementioned remarks altogether, will even so have been sensed and recognized by even that of the hillside or mountaintop abstraction, essentially immediately so, and as though it were supposedly or seemingly dozens and dozens of miles away. Again, understandably, by no means is such a far away or distant proximity to the self-substance to have at all been the case, as demonstrated otherwise in the above remarks aforementioned here already. The second proposition is that even the direction and spatial position proximity of China itself has the capability and endowment to see right through and through the planet Earth's interior of its core, its mantle, its crust, and so forth, and ultimately on and over its seeing sense faculty in attentiveness and observation and recognition to that of the self-substance himself. This is in concordance with that of the abstraction of China, its own spatial direction, position, and relativity to that of the self-substance. This understanding that extends its practice and means of operativeness on and over to the proposition where some very far away and exceedingly distant galaxy to have been made manifest and conscious before and a part of the self-substance's volition. Then, indeed, such manifest galaxy has the capability and means of operativeness to sense with its indivisible substantiated sense of faculties that of the self-substance, as though it were millions and millions of light years away, and as though there were various planets and stars and other obstructive inanimate substance materials, to have been supposedly and seemingly as though along the course to the galaxy's sense faculties themselves some measureless and magnanimous hindrance in the delineation and angle from the recognition and understanding of the galaxy to that of the manifestation of the self-substance himself. Though, again, by no means is such distance from the self-substance to have at all been the case, neither do the various other inanimate substance materials along the course at all obstruct or hinder the delineation and angle from the galaxy's sense faculties to that of the manifestation and recognition of the self-substance himself, as demonstrated otherwise in the above remarks aforementioned here already. The self-substance is as though manifest with some very peculiar and distinctly hued coloration in relativity to the external actual physical threshold, as though perhaps a brilliant white light is the hued coloration for the most of his time's duration, perhaps, that of which such peculiar and distinctly hued coloration of the self-substance immediately gives off in a way recognition and an understanding of the various other inanimate substances that are attributable to the external actual physical threshold, their own immediate observation, understanding and recognition that the self-substance himself is manifest before us just right now. Were this specific secondary proposition demonstrated just now to possess and inherit its own sound and credible validation at all whatsoever, then it seems as though that somehow it cannot identify or correlate harmoniously or concordantly with that of the remarks and demonstrations and so forth inherit a part of the aforementioned first primary, more deep and more profound proposition demonstrated just beforehand the specific secondary, perhaps less deep and less profound proposition. Somehow, some way, however, both of these two propositions ultimately possess and inherit that of their own soundness, credibility, and validation. October 11, 2013. What you are, continued 3. 10/14/2013. Things are quite alright. They have been so quite very much. Not any news from today, however, no. As concerning the property situation. Okay. I'm waiting until the 18th. I know that you haven't got long. For the Running Springs place to become available for its inspection. Excellent. No, of course. Each day, however, I search online. Well, let's hope that Running Springs is the one. For apartment offerings. Yes, of course you do. Yes, I still affirm of the Running Springs place. I couldn't imagine what obstruction could come up with this. How could it be denied to me, this place? I don't know how it could be done so. I won't expect it to be done so. I trust this one. I hope for this one. I know it will be the one. Yes, even so, it will probably be temporary. No longer than perhaps 3 or so months. I wish to return to Big Bear. Do you? Or perhaps at last move up north somewhere out of California here. You really like it in Big Bear. North might be better. I'm truly at home here, a part of this climate. Right. Yes, it suits you. North up in Idaho, Montana, or Wyoming. But to get away from the darkness. The climate is forested and mountainous everywhere a part of these states. Oh, yes, no return to that. That must be over with. Forested mountains with light. Continue to preserve its extraction from it. Yes, that is your destiny. My destiny, yes. It is. It can be no other way. I have even Even today, a new organ work done. Heavy organ work, this one it is called. Right. Yesterday's it was light organ work. Both of them at over 30 minutes. Goodness. Very good works these are, too. They're not so deep or profound. Before I can listen. But they are light and cheerful. I'm looking forward to those. Very advanced. Light and cheerful. That is because you have because you have felt better. Very advanced. I felt so, darling. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes, well, they would be. They change with you. There are so many different thoughts and ideas. If you mature, so does your music. Whirling about, flowing about in these pieces. Right. I'm at a good, even better state by now. Therefore, the music transitions up above from the part cheerfulness and depth, and sorrowfulness and tragedy, and so forth. There's not so much need for such qualities anymore. Well, not in the state that I'm at, that I made it to right now. Marvelous. Yes, I'm so happy to read this. Because wildness is still a part of these pieces. You have hope. Very great wildness and intensity. For better times. I feel so. And things are looking better. They are, I agree, far better. I look forward to the day when you actually find a place to settle. I mean, for years. Yes, of course. Where you hunker down into the community. Place it is out there, right? Become part of it. It can only be north from here. So that when you leave in the day, people will wave to you. I know that sounds funny, but I don't mean active socially. I anticipate the thought of it, but just neighborly. Yes, I like that. I sense this over time, acquiring it, obtaining it. First you need to find a place you love. Of course, that you feel comfortable in, then get used to it. Ultimately, perhaps Alaska, indeed, at the very end. You said before that Alaska is very bleak, and there are not many people there. Well, I have found somebody else in person by then. Will you not feel cut off? Ah, yes, I see. Well, you see, if you were a couple, yes. Oh, wondrous the thought that is. It is, to share things. I would not mind a continuous presence of her. I wonder about this. But how to find someone when you're not out in the world is a difficult question. This life experience does not have to be so magnanimous to me. To find someone, you must be active socially. That is a concern, as you say, yes. In some way, yes. I always think of walking groups, etc. It is a difficult situation, and yet I know that you're a loner, just wanting one other person. Still, I am very much so, yes. So it is catch-22. The others out in public experience of them. Indeed, I will return to bitterness and madness and severity and so forth against them. Whether that in person alone, I am wholly harmonious with the Creator. The others of the West, there are still the others, the cast-outs, the exiles. Yes, well, there must be one other out there, in tune with you. They are still ultimately criminals. I wonder about this one other out there. This is difficult to comprehend the possibility of her, some other one. I know. That is identifiable sufficiently enough to me. But there has to be. I wonder about it. There are billions of people. Right. Out of all the light ones, there must be one who finds harmony with you. Who can relate to you. I've thought about this abstraction. Even so, I say to myself, there are hundreds of millions of them, all castaways, life negators, creator negators, self-resenters. It could be sound that even billions of them, these others, every last one of them, by now, castaways. Well then, you will always be alone, if that is the case. It seems more sound than the other side. That would be true, yes. I hope that there is somewhat. But I do not conclude on this, as though fixated with it, no. But you would have to be somewhere to meet her. Yes, it is so difficult. To be somewhere where it is likely to meet her. I want you to be happy, but I understand how difficult this is. Not even in Big Bear, I don't think, is such an opportunity possible. No, of course not. These are the final ages of the West. It is difficult for us. They are. Those that are like us. Indeed. Well, here I say it. So true. There are those that are like us. It must be sound and valid. There are others as such. Just have to be out there. There are. or there are accountable a handful of them only. But how do we meet them? Out of masses and masses of scraps. Yes. I wonder about it. I don't say to a firm or the computer. To meet them. Such persons. No. Get off the computer, he says. Don't give up on the computer, though. Well, no, not ultimately give up on the computer, right? It is there where you might meet someone. You just can't tell. I think that ultimately such abstraction must be the case for this. Yes. For this quest for her. I'm quite alright tonight. Excellent. I've had quite a day today, actually. Oh, first of all, I found yet another place around here as potential apartment offering. This one in Crest Line. I had emailed this woman about it. She had called me back, left a message, then, before I could call her back, my phone battery, I understand it dies. I look around online for any shop around here to purchase one, a new one. With this very outdated phone model that I have, I can only find the nearest store in that terrible town. Name withheld. So I drive down there, of course, by now. Every visit to that town, I drive down there into it, exceedingly reluctantly, with great fury against that city. Of course, I made it into the shop area, and I step out of my vehicle. Nothing physically bad had happened to me, but I would step out of my vehicle, be exposed to the elements of that town. I sense this, yes. The moment that I step out of it, I understand. It is as though that several or so guns are immediately potentially pointed at me, at all times, for whatever zero-grade street thugs, that it is as though there anywhere in that town that I could be shot at and killed at any specific moment in time. That town, I'm sure that is not so wide off the mark. Right, darling, it's truly completely fallen. It is terrifying to comprehend this. From time to time, I must utilize that town for whatever supplies or commodities, head into that war zone of savagery and primitive warfare. I feel the same about London. Right, then I cannot comprehend how bad the situation is afterward. I'm researching more about this town, and afterward, it's truly far worse, that town. Note the situation of the West, than was beforehand understood, that San Bernardino towns, they're becoming transitioned into them, over the course of time, a part of each and every remaining town, attributable to American country, to Western civilization, all together. This is not a fantasy, nor a conspiracy. The end times. No, it's not. Right. It's all true. Yeah, but yes, this is horrifying. Everywhere. Yes, London too, and Birmingham. There are murders on the streets, in clear daylight, falling to darkness and degeneracy. Drug deals, prostitutions, assaults, yes, car thefts, burglaries, muggings, graffiti everywhere, vandalism, closed businesses, abandoned buildings. Same here where darkness prevails. All this in clear daylight. Police officers, they do not patrol essentially any of these terrible areas. They give advice to the thugs and so forth. The government officials of such towns, they are helpless. That's right. They have to defend the criminals. We have no-go areas for whites here, or they risk their very own lives against them. Yes, right, no-go areas. Yes, San Bernardino is on standard with Detroit. I read about this. I've seen signs saying no whites here after 7:30 afternoon. This town just essentially south from here, and no whites at all. It's almost entirely poverty-stricken in England, in my country. Right, yes. This is happening all over the West. Teutonics cannot preserve themselves in their Teutonic civilizations. Of course, a genocide. But this genocide, indeed, it was a clear and evident manifestation. It is blatant. Earlier today, for me, so what happened to you? It was the most uncomfortable experience. Did you find your battery? As though I'm walking in public down there, even though the experience was horrible. And there are these dark eyes on me, always, everywhere, spying on me, silencing me. They do here, for 15 minutes at a time. Savages. My life while in that town, it is severely threatened. How maddening that experience is. I did not find a battery there, neither, no. Oh, my phone works afterward. However, I'm not sure how it is still working, but good enough. After all that, right, good. Such a waste of time that was. So you could phone the lady, to drive dozens of miles into that more zone, but you wasted your time to enter some shops, where in these shops themselves there are zero-grade thugs predicated there, sitting there, immediately eyeing and spying on me, embittering me, for I'm fair-skinned and Teutonic. Totally out of place. While at the same time, Teutonic is situated within Teutonic civilization itself. I know, it is a nightmare. Nightmarish this is. Yes, life threatened. No more than merely 15 minutes there. So as to your new home, I could ever imagine situated permanently in such a town. You have more of a choice now. No, never. At the same time, all of the West is becoming transitioned to such zero-grade type of towns. It is. At least 4 of our major cities have fallen. Yes, there are 2 choices lined up for me now as to the home situation. Good. Both home inspections take place this fixed day. Okay. Both of them are home situations without housemates. Sounds good. Places to myself, yes. Excellent. So pleased. One must be right. But indeed, as you say, major cities have fallen. 10, 16, 20 to 13. How are you? How are things? I'm quite alright. Excellent. I'm tired right now, however. I love to hear that. Oh, yes, darling, of course. You have been busy, no doubt. I've been sleeping quite a lot as of today. Right. Of course, I was exhausted from yesterday. I'm doing alright, however. Good. Are you happy with your latest compositions? I call them compositions. Yes, I am, of course, very much so, actually, right. Haha. They're indeed close enough to them. I think of you as his towering composer. To that abstraction. Ah, great. I do. I love that thought. I see you sitting there with your hair all wild. I agree too. This wild man, this wild intellect of his, creating these little masterpieces. Yes, this wild man of intellect. Little masterpieces, really? 30 to 40 minutes, so many of them are. Well, big masterpieces. Yes, darling, Either way, that's what they are. He's very wild, this man, his intellect. And I see you struggling and emotional. Right? Sometimes you hear his father's tears, his crying tears in these pieces. It is hard to describe as here. In the latest ones, no, in the earlier ones, the earlier string pieces, ah yes, such as in the essences, I loved those, especially in the fantasy for strings pieces. I did too. Now, even the essences pieces are outdated. They were wonderful. They're simplistic compared to the present era now. Now, in these latest pieces, I love many of your works from earlier on till the present day. There are these 4 to 5 voices. Oh, of course, even if they are simplistic, I think they all have greatness, yeah. But indeed, now as I say above, there is so very much going on in them. These latest pieces, it is an acquired skill. It is now perfecting itself over time, ever further. Of course, right? Like I always say, development of it, your music matures as you do. It does, of course. Now the music is cheerful, yes. It is not so deep or melancholy. Perhaps there's an explanation of this. Melancholic qualities, but now completed and sufficient enough. Perhaps that reflects your mood. In the many earlier compositions, it might, yes. So indeed, there could always be a return to the depth and tragedy. Oh yes, we never stay the same. Such qualities would still be authentic, yes. Your music has always reflected your mood of the moments, anger and despair. Yes, of course, darling. Happiness and lightness. Yes, that is what makes them flow, a man's life in music. I am ultimately absolutely cheerful, actually. Nothing stagnates. The more perfect that I am, the more cheerful that I am, the more light that I am. Almost infinite light. It is examined by me earlier, this infinite light. I am capable of manifesting this kind of quality. It is strange and hard to demonstrate in words, but indeed genius is everywhere present in me, capable to outdoing everybody else, but far, and I do not exaggerate on this. It is, I believe you. That is an isolating thought. It is a lonely thought, but truthful nonetheless. Well, most geniuses have felt that. If you read their lives, it is not the steering away of thoughts from the others. Fortunately, they are never truly happy. Right, never truly happy around those others. And they do feel isolated in their own minds. Torment and affliction is indeed from other persons. They are outstanding, exceedingly so, around the others. There are eyes targeted at them. Forever it is like this with us. It must be eradicated, those eyes, from against us. Agreed. Otherwise, debilitating effects will indeed take occurrence to the Janus over the course of time. Such debilitating effects have clearly been the case with me. I know. It has affected me over time. It has been so difficult for you. Refined me, yes, to be in the world but not of the world. But I would not ever be this powerful if it weren't for the negativity of them. I'm very frail and fragile, ultimately very soft and kind, innocent, and intellectually playful. Well, I suppose the ordinary person can't easily bond with someone so lofty of thoughts. No, they cannot do so, by no means. I am naively playful of intellectual activity and of wisdom, innately and naturally so. So far, I suppose you either find your intellectual equivalent or make do with lesser beings. Nobody else has proven to me that they are capable to manifest these qualities. That is, so innately and naturally so. I doubt they are. Right, they are the darkness of me. Yes, the lower grades, qualities, ranks, reads, they are darling, and it will be so always. I found my intellectual equivalents only in Radius and in Tor. Yes. And in you. Of course. Radius, ask, not me. Of course, Radius, not me. 3 of the others. I'm not your intellectual equivalents. I'm far down the scale. No, not absolutely so, but you're sufficiently equivalent. You carry Ask's DNA close enough. Oh, I do so. Well, that is good to know. And Ask has clearly created a seed that was of my own breed, a very sharp and strong time of his. There's only descent from thereafter his subsequent children, from better to good to bad to worse. Yes, the 4 of us children is tetragrammaton indeed, but of course the original tree was strong, powerful. Oh yes, for will cause I am. By the fruit ye shall know the tree. By the fruit, yes, you are excellent fruit. Ha ha. I'm by no means rotten. Excellent fruit, right, you finest. It is. What, pear? Or apple? Oh, material cause would be banana. What else? I think a peach. So beautiful to behold. I don't know about that. Smells so wonderful. Haha. Whatever fruit that is a father archetype predicated. Perhaps an apple. That fruit would be attributable to me. The apple at the very beginning. Right, apple and pear so far mentioned. Oh yes, indeed. Hard and strong. Good to look at. Apple is the primary full cause fruit. Oh yes, there's watermelon, and winter melon, and honeydew melon. All this seems queenly. The queen of fruits, efficient cause fruits. We shall discuss all this much more elaborately later. A course is orange pippin, the finest of apples. It is the greatest of fruits, it has to be so. I think so. Orange, now that is material cause fruits, fire elements. Orange is good too. Berries perhaps as final cause, earth element fruits. 10/17/2013. I'll let you know that I'm alright tonight. I'm calm and restful, understandably kept to myself. Quiet, and here it is. As well, I was earlier working on another piece, this one with a classical guitar sound to it. The piece is exceedingly ornate and elaborate in its musical thought abstractions. I think that this latest piece, Study for Guitar, is a masterful work, masterful demonstration of counterpoint and harmony, especially so. Almost legitimately Bach-like the piece it is. Also tomorrow I should be able to inspect the running springs of place, as well as the other crestline place. All of these events I'm alright and have been so ultimately so for a good number of days. Oh, it all sounds so positive. I will listen to the organ work and of course the guitar work. And of course the guitar, though the classical guitar has always been something I dislike. It'll be interesting to see what you can do with it. You may give it a sound that appeals to me. Good. Yes, you mentioned you do not like harpsichord neither, as it were a bony skeletal sound. Perhaps you dislike guitar as well for a similar reason, or, well, for the reason itself as well. You will like my piece of its instrument, however, I assure you of this. Oh, that is a famous quote by Sir Thomas Beecham. The harpsichord sounds like two skeletons copulating on a tin roof. Haha, it is sensible. I do not mind his instrument, however. No, I think the classical guitar always irritates me. I find it weak. Ah, I see, weak. I don't dislike the harpsichord myself. It is also not advanced enough. It is not capable to display, represent, or perform advanced enough musical thought abstractions. Yes, a classical guitar. Very Spanish. Something I have no connection with. Of course, classical guitar in contrast to whatever other solo instruments. Yes, right, of course. Agreed. And of course, neither do I have no connection with classical guitar. Very Spanish. Though it is something new to me. Other solo instruments have far more gravitas. That is, it is merely a setting on my keyboard. The guitar is setting. Though I'll listen with keen interest. I will not leave most any type or kind of keyboard setting here unused. I bet it sounds better than the real thing. I think it does sound better than the real thing, actually. Haha, then I will enjoy it. The music of my piece cannot be performed on a guitar itself. Well, listen indeed with keen interest. It is ultimately sounding as though of a keyboard, but of course with merely guitar-like sound. It sounds as though I would prefer it. You would prefer it indeed, of course. I shall be happy to listen to the organ work too. Oh yes, you sound pleased with both. Listen to either light organ work or heavy organ work, and that means they must be good. I like the latter one very much. Oh, they are good, yes. I shall start with the light organ work. Of course, good, darling. When it arrives, then indeed, listen to the entire work. Well, of course not straight away. Of course not straight through. Only the most legitimate madman could do this to himself. Well, I have been known to do that over one weekend. His skepticism would be so very actualized with him. Watching it on DVD from start to finish. Oh my, over one weekend. From Frank Day to York's Day, when I was on holiday. Of course, we shut everything down, closed the curtains. Yes, it had a Wagner's Ring weekend. It was wonderful. Oh, so lovely. 16 or so hours of him. I don't know how I did it now. Yes, what a journey. No, of course, but indeed, as you say, what a journey. And when it had finished, we were exhausted. Lose yourself in his world. We wanted to start it all over again. We felt this way about him. I mean, tried to do this. Couldn't bear to lose the story and music and the whole magnificence of it. It was so moving, drained us. No, of course not. As I say above, extract yourself from this world and into this greatest composer's own mind in his own world. Yes, become lost in it. Do so if his life experience has escaped from it, then the horrible reality when you throw back the curtains, trivialized and of no use to us, and realize that you're suddenly in the real world. Ghastly. Right, of course. Wagner's music speaks everywhere of this abstraction. Fly away from them, he says to us. I desire to try for one sitting of the ring sometime. You should, you really should. Yes, and especially so when I'm at my own place, sometime this next month. I just must have my own place after this relocation. It is a profound and deeply moving experience. Yes, you must. There's the running springs in the crest line place, both of them no housemates. Well, one of them must be right for you. What a wondrous experience to look forward to. I know. Freedom. No interruptions or distractions. You can live however you want with no disturbance, no nonsensical household noise. Awful or wonderful. I'll be able to do so. Yes, you'll have complete freedom. I'm so good with Creator as of lately. Well, there you are. Since I do not wish to reveal this to anybody else, such a reward is probably very deserved to me. I knew you would be. It is. You have waited and suffered a long time. Yes, it must be actualized after this next move. I have waited and suffered a long time. Of course, we know this. Everybody else himself knows this. Of course. I will not speak of this further for now, however. And now the way is open to happiness. But you're right, we shall not speak of it now. No fury or wrath can be provoked from him on this subject matter. No, indeed. No good. Just think of listening to Wagner. Yes, and traveling on his wonderful journey with them. Siegfried, Brunhilde, what wondrous abstractions. Little boy, blue. Little boy, green. 10. Yeah, October 18, 2013.